Hey Year 9, it is now week 12, session 3. Now, this is the last time I'm going to speak to you about these speeches, but my expectation is that they will be done as beautifully as I've seen some of you already do them. What I'm also going to do after today's session is let your teachers, so your individual class teachers, know that the expectation is that you have completed all the learning on these speeches and that they're going to put out a call on Show My Homework for you to send the speeches to them. So you will see a communication from your individual class teachers this week. So my Year 9s will get a message from me. Miss Reed's Year 9s, Miss Williams, Miss Riley, you will get an individual kind of just check in with your teacher because they are now responsible for counting in the speeches. So after today, and by the end of next week, the expectation is that you will have forwarded your complete speech to your individual teacher. So I know, for example, I've seen Holly's speeches, but Holly, as wonderful as they are, I would still ask that you send a copy to Miss Reed so that she has a record as well, because this is what we're trying to gently strengthen your understanding of, that these speeches have real weight and value when we come back in year 10. So what are we going to do in week 12 session 3, and what will we do in your lesson tomorrow? So your lesson tomorrow is the big fat quiz at the end of the year. So it'll be a quiz. Those of you that are ahead of the game will then do the quiz and then you're done. For others, it will create again a little window of time to get your speeches complete. Okay, so we are going to just do our final session today on giving you a chance to memorize and think about memorization and delivery of your speech. So those of you that have been on this journey with me, you've kept up every stage of the way. We have ticked off every box now on these lists. We've looked at the 3 appeals of rhetoric, the 5 parts of rhetoric, and we are focusing on memory and delivery, which is brilliant because the link to our future outcomes then is that you'll be filmed delivering these speeches at the beginning of year 10. Now, the delivery of those speeches will not include you being recorded reading off a page or reading out of a book. Your teacher, I'm afraid, will say to that. You will have to read in some way that demonstrates delivery and elements of memory, which is what we've just been introducing this week. So we've talked about the 4 E's of persuasion, that really we want to be, or you will be measured on your ability to engage, to educate, to emphasize, and to create an emotional connection with your audience. We introduced the idea of memory, that memory can be learning by rote and a mix of improvisation. Now, this is why we see a scale of grades for speech delivery. And there is an element of those of you that can improvise and feel less stressed by improvisation that potentially can get a higher grade. But we've also got the window of opportunity to learn chunks of our speech by rote, by heart, so that you can still achieve and score highly in terms of delivery and style. We introduced the idea yesterday that delivery is a combination of our pace, tone, volume, and that really we want a variation of those 3 elements. And although we're not seeing it now, at some point when you are stood in front of a camera, the importance of things like gesture and how we use our hands and our body posture and body language. So far, so good. So what I'm going to do now is you're going to listen to me read the end of my speech. And I'm just going to challenge you to think about how you would comment on my delivery. So you've got 4 little sentence fragments here to copy and complete. Okay, now this is just, again, sometimes it's so much easier to criticize somebody else, isn't it? We're very good. It's very natural to pick out the faults in somebody else. And I'm only getting you to do this because then when you turn the ear on yourself, when you listen to yourself, your recorded speeches, you'll be able to come at it from the same way that you've come to me. So I'm going to read this in a minute and you're going to decide about the speech. So you're going to decide, is my pace is slow, too quick, perfect. So you might copy and complete this first statement like, the pace is too slow, which is off-putting because I get bored. You might say the pace is too fast, which is difficult to follow because it goes too quickly. Now, tone, remember, tone can be, is it a sense of happy tone, sad tone, angry tone, authoritative? So in other words, how does my voice sound? Now, what we want with tone really is a marriage between my tone and my words. So if I'm talking about, something pretty horrendous and my voice sounds quite happy and upbeat, actually that tone is not matching what I'm saying, is it? So you could say the tone is at odds with what's being said, or the tone is happy, which is wrong because you're talking about something really sad. You need to change your tone. Volume, is it too quiet, too loud? So you're going to think about the volume. And then how would you improve my delivery? What advice would you give me? How would you direct me to deliver it? Okay, so you're going to just listen to me read the end. And as I read, you're going to then be thinking about how you'd copy and complete your statements to give me some honest yet helpful feedback. Are we ready? Okay. We all have a moral duty to educate ourselves about the horrors faced by some of the most poorest and happiest and vulnerable children across the world. We all have a moral duty to reject fashion that is tainted by the exploitation of children. We all have a moral duty to stand against child labour so that all children can be the lucky ones. So, what would you say about my delivery? Okay, so pause and just have a little copy and complete these statements in terms of the delivery. Now, guys, I want you to listen to me read it again. Now, I'm not saying you have to copy and complete in exactly the same words, but you might just think about the keywords. You might just say this time like notes. Pace is, tone is, volume is. So just some keynotes. But I'm going to read it slightly differently just to show you that variation. And you can get it, can't you? I'm deliberately trying to illustrate some of the problem areas we fall into. That last one, the pace was definitely too quick, which makes it really difficult to follow because all the ideas become one. The tone is strangely upbeat considering what I was talking about, and then it kind of changed and became boring. The volume, you can decide, slightly loud. Okay, so how would you think about this delivery? Are you ready? We all have a moral duty to educate ourselves about the horrors faced by some of the poorest and most vulnerable children across the world. We all have a moral duty to reject fashion that is tainted by the exploitation of children. We all have a moral duty to stand against child labour so that all children can be the lucky ones. So maybe with that one, you don't have to do each of them, but you might just make a quick note. Pace was okay, volume was too quiet. Now, it's easy when you start to think about how you would improve delivery and feedback to others that when we turn this process on ourselves, we're going to be able to do it. So we're going to go back into our own speeches. Now, yesterday we just challenged you to think about memory and delivery of the first part of your speech. Now I'm going to ask you to look at the rest of your speech. Okay, now again, we looked at this process of annotation. So I've looked at the end of the speech and I'm going to try and maybe emphasize the word all by being really clear and firm. I'm going to try and use gestures to illustrate the three verbs, educate, reject, and stand. I'm going to try and add emotion to the words horrors, poorest, vulnerable. So what I'm doing here by putting this little stopgap between I've written my speech and now I'm just going to say it, by really thinking about how I want to say words, I'm being intentional. And I'm reminding myself that the way in which we deliver a speech is not spontaneous and off the cuff. So I'm putting in this step of annotation and practice because that's what you will need to do. So I'm just going to read it to you using my notes, okay? We all have a moral duty to educate ourselves about the horrors faced by some of the poorest and most vulnerable children in the world. I didn't quite get the emotion there, so I'm going to go back, do that again. Okay. We all have a moral duty to educate ourselves about the horrors faced by some of the poorest and most vulnerable children across the world. We all have a moral duty to reject fashion that is tainted by the exploitation of children. We all have a moral duty to stand against child labour so that all children can be the lucky ones. So, better delivery than the first two, but I'm using my notes and my annotations to help me think about it. And it's slowing me down in the right way. I'm not becoming boring and monotonous because I'm thinking about emphasis and words. So your job today is to look at the rest of your speech. And you don't necessarily have to make notes for every sentence, every paragraph, but just in the margins of your speeches, highlighters are a wonderful friend at this point. Circle and make notes in the margins about how you might deliver it. Now, in terms of memorization, it's just that reminder. Look at the improvisation, look at which sections could be improvised. So you're going to have time today to look at your delivery and to look at your memorization. You see my error. I was looking at the wrong saved version. I didn't have this paragraph where it should be. So I do apologise. Gone and quickly changed it. The magic of technology. So improvisation. Now, actually, if you look at the blue words, educate, reject, stand. Now, sometimes when we're improvising, we can fall back on that pattern we know about definition and amplification. So we could just unpack a little bit what we mean by educate, reject, stand. We could improvise that. We don't need to have that written down. And what I love about the end of this speech, it kind of shows actually at the level of learning by rote how some of these rhetorical devices work. This anaphora makes it easy to remember the beginning of these sentences. Now, the educate, reject, and stand, again, give me a signpost to help me improvise. Okay, so I've got one version here. Now, I'm going to learn by rote. We all have a moral duty to educate. We all have a moral duty to reject. We all have a moral duty to stand. Okay? And we're thinking that needs to be learnt exactly. But there's some areas that we could improvise as well. So we all have a moral duty to educate ourselves. In other words, we have a moral duty to find out, to not be ignorant, to not turn off the TV when a news report comes on. Guys, we have a moral duty to educate ourselves, to find out about the horrors faced by some of the poorest and most vulnerable children across the world. But guys, it doesn't end there. We all have a moral duty to reject fashion that is tainted by the exploitation of children. And what I mean by rejecting fashion is simply saying no when I walk into a shop. No, I'm not going to buy that cheaply produced top. No, I'm going to go and look for a top, look for brands that actually don't exploit children. So can you see, guys, I'm doing this as I read through, as I'm learning my speech by heart. There's moments where I can improvise. Now, improvisation is a key to a higher grade. It's an upgrade moment because you're not looking at your sheet, you're engaging with the audience. And one of the best ways to improvise is to look at something you've learnt and then think about that amplification, that definition moment, taking it a little bit further. And that's what I'm doing. Now, I am old and I've had practice doing similar sort of things. But actually, guys, you can do the improvisation. You can explain what we mean by educate, reject, and stand against something, even though the sentence, going beyond the confines of your sentence. So, and I was doing a little bit more as well, improvisation, repeating certain words, emphasizing them. So it's really changing as well my delivery. So sometimes when we begin to memorize and improvise, it can improve delivery. And never be afraid when you're doing a speech to pause. So if you suddenly were trying to improvise and you lost your train of thought, I always loved it. Ever watch Friends? Best advice from Joey ever when he's teaching somebody about acting. He calls it the smell the fart moment. And he says, as an actor, and I apologize if you don't get Friends, but I love it. And he talks about whenever he feels like he forgets his lines, he does this look like he's smelling for the fart. Okay, and he kind of does this dramatic pause and he lifts his nose up and he looks around. Now, I'm not saying we have to quite think we're smelling a fart, but you can use gaps and silences to your advantage. So if you're trying to learn something and improvise it, look for the natural pauses, the natural rhythms of your speech. Okay, so we wouldn't want to pause like this. We all have a moral duty. So we want to pick our moments of pause. So we all have a moral duty to stand against child labour. What I mean by that, to stand against child labour, is to not be silent, to not be ignorant, to use our voices, our power as consumers, our powers as people in this educated society that we have pride that we live in, to take a stand. And we want to take a stand against child labour so that all children can be the lucky ones. Now, actually, a nice trick for improvisation as well, that is repetition of the right word in the right moment. And you can kind of use it to create that variation in your pace and your delivery. Okay? So that we all have a moral duty to stand against child labour. And by stand, I mean we're going to get off our feet. We're going to do something about this terrible exploitation of children. So improvisation. Okay? So guys, your job, your challenge for the last lesson really on this, if your speech is written, is to practice some of these delivery and memorization techniques. There is, again, the flowchart as well. So if you can recruit somebody to listen to you, you will see that there are a series of questions to ask as you read your speech aloud to them.